Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. Our guest this morning is Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DiPasquale, Pittsburgh native, went on to raise his family in York County and represented that area in the State House before becoming Auditor General. You're in your second term. The Post-Gazette notes, quote, even from his row office, he has been wading into policy areas more under the purview of governors and legislators than Auditor General. You're talking about gun safety, you're talking about climate change. How is that in your lane?
Well, on the gun safety side of it, first of all, we looked at existing laws, and I have the ability to audit existing laws. Also, we have had significant amount of gun deaths in Pennsylvania over the last several years. Over the last 10 years, about $1.5 billion in taxpayer dollars has gone to deal with actual gun deaths. So when somebody, whether it's a suicide or a homicide, there are significant taxpayer dollars at stake. So we wanted to see exactly what the ramifications of that were. Obviously, the human toll is the most important, but what can we do to limit firearm deaths in Pennsylvania? And so I put together a report with my authority under the taxpayer dollars that go to this to try to find some common sense ways to deal with this.
Is that something that you believe really can be addressed at the state level? Isn't that a national issue?
There are some things that clearly would need to be at a national level. Some of the things we talked about in the state level was, first of all, 2/3 of firearm deaths in Pennsylvania are suicide related. So we put together a plan on how we could deal with mental health issues as part of that, and how even gun store owners could voluntarily get trained by law enforcement on how to identify some of these trends. We even had gun store owners participate in the report I did, and we found some things that can be done. Again, I don't want to say that I can reduce them even, whether it be 50%. It's about trying to reduce the number somewhat, make the situation a little better.
So this is not a Second Amendment fight.
No, I even had feedback from some people who would be considered, very much pro Second Amendment, that said they went to read my report thinking they were going to hate it, and they ended up reading it and thinking, wow, all these were followed, it wouldn't infringe on anyone's Second Amendment, and they thought would make a difference.
The NRA began, after all, as a gun safety outfit.
That's right. And I think that all of ours would be defined as gun safety.
You're not calling for banning of AR-15s?
No, none of that stuff is
or anything like that.
What I said to my team when we were starting this report is, whether any of us agree or disagree with any of those legislative proposals, I believe my mandate as Auditor General is existing law, and how can we better enforce it.
So you're saying you want to give training, voluntary perhaps, to gun dealers to train them to spot whether a potential customer is suicidal?
Yeah, and again, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but law enforcement has identified traits, and other gun store owners that have participated have found traits that they can, again, limit. Because again, as a private dealer, you don't have to sell. If somebody comes in and you're concerned about the safety, you don't have to sell to them. We also think the Game Commission could expand their program more than to just hunters on other gun safety techniques to make sure that guns aren't laying around the home with kids around.
Right? General, could we also, or could you, I suppose, also expand this to not only people who are contemplating or vulnerable to suicide, but those who are contemplating or vulnerable to mass murders?
That is correct, and we're also going to be traveling around the state. I'm going to be with my team traveling to various hospitals and also meeting with law enforcement on how we can get the word out on some of the things that we've put forward, and even how they can be enhanced so that, again, gun safety can be improved without infringing on anyone's Second Amendment rights.
Would it be appropriate for the Auditor General to call for something like, say, many in your party call for expanding background checks in Pennsylvania to cover private sales at a gun show by a non-licensed dealer?
Look, as an elected official and a citizen, certainly I've even taken those positions in campaigns. In my role in using my staff as Auditor General, I don't think that going beyond existing law is something that we should do. But certainly I've made my position clear that I do think we need to have more comprehensive background checks, for example.
As Eugene DiPasquale, citizen.
Yeah, that's correct.
Auditor General. And what can the Auditor General of Pennsylvania do about climate change?
We do actually have a climate change advisory panel, and so we're going to go in and start there and see what work they've been doing. That was legislatively created in about 2007, so we're going to see what work they've done and then follow through on what the state has done inside of those recommendations, and what additional action is needed. Because if we don't address climate change in a comprehensive way and also in a proactive way, the fiscal impact to our state, both economically and health-wise, is going to be significant moving forward.
Now there's obviously an association, National Association of Auditors General, and there's one of Attorneys General. And the Attorneys General have been very active together in things like health and cigarettes and other kinds of things. Are you active in the national organization, and is this something you might bring to them?
I am going to, we have talked about these two areas, whether it be climate change and gun safety. I mean, certainly when it comes to the Auditor General Association, or sometimes it's just state auditor versus Attorney General, the Attorney General Association is, to be blunt, significantly more active in a lot of these fields, than the auditors. It's just probably by nature of the position.
Okay. What are the financial impacts that you can quantify of climate change, if any, that are happening today?
So when you think about Pennsylvania, for example, if we have port issues where rising waters impact the ports in Philadelphia, for example, that would be a significant economic impact to the state of Pennsylvania. I believe it is, but again, it's something that is happening at such a slow level that it's not like a hurricane where you just see, oh, it's coming in. It's a slow rise over time.
But it's not a matter of belief. Is there data that says it's happening or not?
The science community is clear that this is happening.
I'm talking about in Philadelphia. The port
there's no. I believe it's happening, but the science community has not weighed in that it is specifically impacting Philadelphia yet. However, a lot of the extreme storms we've been getting, whether it be Pennsylvania or any other state, certainly it can be attributed to climate change.
And certainly the vulnerability of this community is enormous.
Well, when you have obviously the three rivers around,
and parking lots that are closed at normal times.
That's right. I mean, but the extreme storms is something that the science community believes is significantly tied to climate change.
And another area of vulnerability is our hillsides that have been giving way at a rate no one's ever seen before, and the potential for flooding. But again, climate change at the state level, it seems like a massive problem that you're throwing a little dart at.
Here would be my answer to that, which is you're on one hand absolutely correct. This should be tackled at a national or even international level.
Right.
However, if no one's going to do anything at the national level, then it's up for the states to at least do what we can.
I want to ask you about something else. You recently were honored, along with former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent, by Allegheny College with their prize for civility in public life in Pennsylvania. Is that a currency that's worth much these days? Civility? Don't the people who are less civil get most of the attention?
But when we were sort of walking up, I told Congressman Dent, I said, well, this may be the end of our political career. So I hope not. I mean, I do know that these things go in cycles, but we are who we are. And so I'm not going to fake my personality just to try to appease some cycle.
Websites, cable news, they don't spend a lot of time covering civil discussions, right? Do you have a problem with that? Do you have the problem with the way that our politics is managed and covered?
I do have a concern that on the political discourse, and certainly I have significant issues not only with the policies of the president but his behavior. But I know that he is not alone on this. The shining light sometimes gets the attention, but I believe if we're going to solve a lot of these problems, we've got to work together to do it. And I've been trying to practice what I preach on that.
Post-Gazette, Tracy Moriello noted that you are weighing, this was last month, she noted you are weighing two options for your next act because your term is up in 22. You're coming to the end of your second term. You can't run for a third. You're considering running for governor or senator. So the governor's office will be vacant. Tom Wolf will be finishing his second term. Pat Toomey will be finishing his second term.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I am having discussions with people on where my skills could be best utilized. It's pretty clear at this stage of the game that the Pirates don't need a righty out of the bullpen throwing about 73 miles an hour, so I need to come up with some other vehicle.
How about a place kicker?
We may be the place kicker option, but I still want to stay involved in public life. I think I have something to offer, and I want to figure out where my talents and abilities would best be used in further service when I'm done with my term as Auditor General.
Would you want to avoid a primary with another prominent Democrat, maybe an Attorney General or something like that?
Look, any politician that tells you that they don't want to avoid a contested primary is lying to you. But at the end of the day, all of these offices should be earned, not given, whether it's myself or anyone else. If you're going to be granted, a lot of power, you should have to earn that power, and whether it's a contested primary or a contested.
But might you have a discussion with somebody else who might have the same interests?
That stuff may or may not happen, but I think power
Back
should.
to Fifth Avenue in 1964.
I think power should be earned, not given.
Okay. As an icon of civility in politics, what did you make of the Casey Barletta campaign, the Wagner-Wolf campaign?
I do think that the Senate campaign was more civil than the governor's campaign. I think Senator Wagner's, some of his, the golf spikes to the face was certainly out of line. But I do think that the Senate campaign, while there was a couple ads that maybe went a little bit too far, I do think that that was at least a more civil tone. And I think I want to commend both former Congressman Barletta, Senator Casey, and Governor Wolf, because I think the three of them acted in a very civil way, even though they had a hot contest on the issues. I think Senator Wagner certainly made some mistakes.
We just have less than 30 seconds. Your Democratic colleague, Bob Casey, just reelected, has been doing some interviews and talking about the possibility of running for president. You see that as a legitimate possibility?
Look, he would have a lot of work to do. Certainly he doesn't have a national profile, but I think first as a man, as an elected official, and as a human being, he represents, I think, thoughtful dignity, and right now the country could use more of that.
And we just, in our final segment, anything you'd like to say very briefly about the recent tragedy that Pittsburgh is still reeling from and will be for some time?
Look, it's horrifying. I actually came home from the grocery store that day. I saw something on Facebook from Katie Letterman. Her dad was my Little League coach. The Lettermans are obviously involved in the Tree of Life Synagogue, and I said, turn on the TV, and it was literally my old neighborhood looking like a war zone. It's something that for me, that was the day where it said, if it can happen in Squirrel Hill, it truly can happen anywhere.
Eugene DiPasquale, thank you so much. We'll take a break. Back with the final thought in just a moment.